to introduce tonight's speaker, Nan Rossiter. She is a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of many novels, including The Gin and Chowder Club. Her books have been highly acclaimed by reviewers from Publishers Weekly to Booklist, and her seventh novel, Summer Dance, was a 2018 winner of the Nancy Pearl Book Award. Along with many contemporary fiction novels, she's also an author-illustrator of several books for children. Please join me in welcoming Nan Rossiter. Nan, thank you so much for being here tonight with us.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me.
And we were just talking in the room. Nan is from Connecticut, and we were excited to learn that she knows where Goshen, Connecticut is, very close to her where she is. And Goshen, as some of you may already know, is kind of the roots of a lot of the settlers from Hudson grew up and were born in Goshen and traveled and settled Hudson. So it's kind of a fun connection. So Nan, I'm going to let you take it away and then we'll get right into questions.
Okay, sounds good. So I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight because I can't see you. So I was just telling Polly she might be the only one there than I'm just talking to, but she assured me that there are more people out there. And so I'm so thankful to have you all take time to learn about my books tonight. And to have some new fans from Ohio, because it's just, it's great to have people all over the country. And COVID, as awful as it has been, really has made that possible, because before this, we weren't doing events like this. It was just local bookstores in Connecticut. So it's great to have you all here tonight. So as Polly said, I've been on the author journey for almost 25 years. And it's been a lot of ups and downs. I started off writing and illustrating children's books. And my first children's book was called Rugby and Rosie. And it was about a family that raises a guide dog puppy. So that book came out in 1997. And I was telling Polly before that one of my first, when you write a book, you don't know, you just think you're going to write a book and sell the book, but then all of a sudden people start inviting you to come and speak. And you're like, oh, I didn't know that was going to be a part of it. And so I started getting a lot of invitations to visit schools with my books. And I've never been fond of public speaking, even here 25 years later. But one of my first visits was to the Goshen Elementary School, which is, I guess, where Polly said some of your founding fathers are from, which was pretty cool. So Rugby and Rosie is been out of print for many years, but I have the good news that it's being reprinted this summer and it's going to become available in October. So it's one of 4 children's books that I wrote and illustrated. That's how I got started. When I was growing up, I always wanted to be an artist, and I never even considered being a writer. I went to art school. I went to Rhode Island School of Design, and I majored in illustration. One of my teachers was Chris Van Allsburg, who wrote The Polar Express, Jumanji. So I have all signed copies of those because it was around that time when he was really actively writing. And so when I graduated from RISD, I freelanced for 10 years. And then I decided that I was tired of always illustrating what other people wanted me to illustrate. They would give me an assignment. I had to do it exactly the way they wanted it. And so I wanted to have more room for creativity. And I decided to try writing and illustrating a children's book. And so it took quite some time to find a publisher, but I didn't give up. One of the biggest things about the journey in writing and in getting published is definitely having perseverance and patience, prayer, just not giving up. It took a long time to find a publisher. I didn't have an agent back then. I was freelancing, so I was doing a book jacket for an art director at Viking in New York, and I asked him if he would submit my story to an editor, and he sent it to an editor at Dutton Children's Books, which is another division of Penguin, and she loved it. So back then, you could find a publisher without an agent. So I went on to do 3 books with Dutton, and then when I submitted my 4th story, they turned me down. And I thought I was going to always write and illustrate children's books, but they turned me down, and I kept submitting new stories. They kept rejecting them. They said my books were too quiet, or they hadn't sold. Rugby and Rosie did very well. My first one, it won the Golden Sower Award in Nebraska, which I don't know what Ohio has for kids' book awards. Connecticut, it's a Nutmeg Award. So, and then I started submitting to other publishers, and I still got a lot of rejections. And then my children's books all started to go out of print, which was heartbreaking because you think they're going to always be in print. And I went for 9 years without publishing anything. And during that time, I wrote another children's book and found a publisher for it, and I wrote my first novel. So the novel had been in my head for a long time, and it took me 2 years to write it. And when you are, on the journey of trying to get published, you're investing a lot of time, and you never know if it's actually going to happen. So you're investing time and energy and emotion, and so it took me 2 years to write it, and then it took 2 more years to find an agent and a publisher, and then 2 more years before the book came out. So it definitely is not an easy journey, for sure. So I went on to do 7 novels with that publisher, and then I felt like I sort of reached a plateau with my audience, and I decided to change. And I left my agent, I left my publisher, and I thought for surely with 7 novels under my belt and 4 children's books, I would find another publisher without any trouble. But it took 2 more years of, just submitting and rewriting and trying. So it's not an easy path, and it definitely is. You have to have the passion for it and the drive to stick with it, especially when finances are tight. So anyway, the book that was accepted by Harper finally was Promises of the Heart, which is the first book in this series. And it was inspired. We've always vacationed on the Cape. And when we always go to, I don't know if you guys know this, but Cape Cod has a baseball league. It's like a minor league, and it's free, and the games are great. And we always try to go to at least one game. And we were there at a game several years back, and a little girl came up to my family. She was drawn to our dog because she loves animals. And she started telling our family about how she had had a heart transplant and how her parents had gotten her a dog to help her through it. And her story was just so inspiring. And she was such a great kid that when we walked away, my son said, "Mom, you have to write about her." And so that's where the initial inspiration for Promises of the Heart came. So one of the main characters in that book is Harper Samuelson. She's 10 years old, and she not only does she need a heart, but she's also an orphan, and she's in the foster program, and she's been moved from home to home, and in that time, she's really developed she's built a wall around herself to protect herself from getting hurt. And so she's a tough kid. She's a tough cookie. She's got a great caseworker trying to place her in a good home. And she loves her caseworker. She wants to live with her. But the woman, she says, Cora is her name. She said, no, you can't stay with us. But and then, so the other main character is Macy Samuelson, and she's had several miscarriages, and it breaks her heart every time. But she doesn't not ready to adopt. She doesn't even want to consider adoption, really. She doesn't think that she could love an adopted child as much as she would love her own. And she also worries about, biological parents coming back and claiming them after she's in love with the child. And so they're struggling with it. She and her husband, Ben, struggle with it. And eventually she ends up adopting a 3-legged golden retriever. And he kind of tries to open the door of their heart to consider adoption. So I'm not going to tell you the whole story because I don't know if you've read it or not. No, I can't even see your heads nodding or shaking. So when I was trying to find my new publisher, my new agent suggested that I propose a series. And so when I was proposing Promises of the Heart, I was also proposing book 2. And that is the book that just came out yesterday. So I'm really excited about it. Promises to Keep is about Macy's younger sister, Maeve. And I knew when I was writing Promises of the Heart that this book was going to come after. So I was building Maeve in Promises of the Heart. And what's great about a series is you've already got the characters and they're already started to be built. And so I knew what Maeve's story was going to be. And I knew she was going to be, her thing is she and her boyfriend have kept things from each other. And so they're finding it hard, like an obstacle to build their relationship because they both know that there are things in their past that they haven't shared with each other. And Maeve is worried that he's going to ask her to marry him and she won't have been completely forthcoming with her past. And I think that's, when I'm writing, it's important to me not only to have characters that are likable, because when I'm reading a book, if I don't like the character, I won't care what happens to them and I probably won't finish the book. But if I really want to, I'm spending a lot of time writing about the character, I want to like them. And I know that readers probably feel the same way about spending time with a character. So most of my characters are pretty likable. I have good traits. And I try to write about things that people can relate to. So the emotions of sorrow and joy and all the things that happen in life that really touch our hearts. And I feel like when I'm writing about things that everyone has happened to them, then they feel less alone. Like I know how the character feels, or I can relate to what they're going through. So those things are important to me. And also an uplifting ending. I'm all about an uplifting ending. I don't know. Life is hard enough without reading a dark book. I don't even like to read dark books, so I'm not going to write one. I think that, a book is an escape, and it's to help you feel less alone and, go to bed with a smile on your face instead of like worried about the character. So those are my goals when I'm writing. I've been asked if I have an outline or I work with an outline. I don't. I have a lot of index cards. Like, just here's my desk right here, and there's just all these index cards with notes on them and sticky notes, things I have to remember to add into a book. And I have my proposal, so I know where the story's going. I know it's 2 pages of a summary, and I try to stick to that. But so I guess, I don't know. You guys have any questions?
Hello, Nan.
Hi, Derek.
Derek. MIA, I'm glad I'm here. So
I'm glad you're here too.
Yeah, I should tell everyone that we had a few technical difficulties at the start. Internet, Zoom, all that kind of fun stuff. So I'm actually going to transition questions. Derek's got some, but it was a pleasure to meet you, Nan. And I wanted to also mention this is a great book, and I loved. It was inspirational to read, but also to hear your story behind it. So, and I know that everyone else will have lots and lots of questions, but I do want to mention that copies of the book are available for purchase courtesy of the Learned Owl, and I've put a link to that in the chat. So take it away, Derek.
Okay. Well, without further ado, this is my first time reading you. It was a fantastic book. I was trying to imagine a lot of the areas in the South. I haven't really been anywhere south. I've been to North Carolina, but nowhere south of that. And you probably may have asked you this question. How did you get the sort of groupings of things? Because I don't want to give too much away, but a young man goes somewhere, and then there's, of course, the, I don't know if you want to call it a retirement home, but, how did all those sort of group together in your mind? Did you use inspiration, or is it just sort of let the story take me there?
Usually, when I have a character and I start off a chapter with their name, the character takes over, and really, I don't even know what they're going to do that day, but at the end of the day, I'm pretty surprised by what has happened in that chapter. So, Maeve, in the first book, she worked in, it's more like a senior care place. It's not really a nursing home. It's more upscale than that. And that it's called Willow Pond Senior Care. And it was inspired by, my dad was in a place like that just down the hill from us. And it was inspired by that place because everybody had their own apartment, and they had happy hour. And my dad didn't go to, he wasn't very social, but they did have a lot of crafts and things. And there was more women that lived there than men. So the ratio, the women were, they're still looking to have a boyfriend or whatever. So in the book, there's a little drama that goes on between the characters, all older. Some are forgetful, some are more so than others. And there's one character that is comes on to the men. And that's because, the place where my dad was, the woman that runs it used to talk about the scandal of what went on there. And it was pretty funny. So, but so the characters, those characters, the older characters in the book, they're secondary, but they were fun to write too. So, and it does take place in the South where things are more laid back. All my first 7 books were all set in New England, but when I switched publishers, my agent suggested that I move my setting. And so I picked Savannah. I visited Savannah, which was a lot of fun, just to make sure everything was authentic about it. But
Okay, great. So when I was reading the book, I was really drawn to a lot of the characters, but especially Gage being an artist. I have an art background myself, and I kind of given up on drawing. I know I should, but it was kind of interesting to see his struggle, and I won't give it away what he was working on, but where did you sort of get the idea of that, of him being this artist and just doing it for fun, but it was sort of his way of kind of working?
Well, all of my books have an artist in them because that's my background. I mean, you can see behind me, there's my drawing table, my lamp. I've had that drawing table since high school. So we've been through a lot together, and drawing with pencil is one of my favorite ways of drawing. So I draw from that. But all the characters in my first 7 went to RISD because that's where I went. I had at least one character that went there, and all my books also have dogs in them. Just for all you dog lovers out there. But being in Savannah, Gage, he went to Savannah College of Art and Design, and he had this thing where his dad, who was, he grew up on a farm, but his dad didn't understand his desire to be an artist and not a farmer. And so that's where that came from.
So when I was reading your book, I sort of thought there was one line in particular that 2 of the characters, and I'll probably mispronounce her name. Is it Maeve?
Maeve, yeah.
I hope I have it right. Gage and Maeve. Okay, good. They both say, "Why is life so complicated?" Which is true for anybody reading that book, but you sort of balance that out too. Again, not giving any spoilers, but how do you sort of balance the 2 out as a writer? I mean, you were right earlier saying you don't want to read a dark read, but you're trying to let the story get where you need to be to.
Well, I can't hear you. I didn't hear that last part, but I'll just go with it.
Okay. I think I might have just said it did have a happy ending, but hopefully my internet's still available. But
a little jumpy.
I guess I'll just read the question again. Hopefully you can hear it this time. So I was just asking, why does life have to be so complicated that the 2 characters basically state in the book, and then how do you balance that out as a writer?
Well, as when I was talking about the book in the beginning, I talked about how they both had things in their past that they weren't willing to talk about. And so this is where, they're both sort of revealing to the reader that there's something in their past. And, I don't say what it is right away, but it's something that they both struggle with independently. They don't want to talk about it. And I think everybody has things in their past that they probably don't want to talk about. So, but again, it's hard to build a relationship when you keep things. I mean, you have to, then if you're not forthcoming in the beginning, then when are you going to be? So you got to get it out there, or you'll always have to live with it.
Yeah, good to live by, that's for sure. So it sounds like there's going to be another book in this series. Is that right? Hopefully.
Yes, there is. In fact,
okay, good.
I just finished writing it.
It makes my next question.
Okay.
Oh, why?
Yes.
Okay, so I imagine it's probably going to focus in on a couple other characters. It seems like the first one focused on a different people. Oh, okay.
Yep.
That seems interesting. Hopefully it'll follow maybe Mason's story.
Actually, well, we didn't even talk about Mason. Yeah, he's the secondary character. Not really a secondary character. I don't know. It's like a sub-story that goes on in the book. He's very important character. And actually, the next book is not about Mason. It's in this book. The next book is called A Measure of Faith. And it's about Gage's younger brother. He's one of the main characters. He's mentioned in this book. His name is Chase. And he's the youngest of 6 boys that grew up on this farm. And his dad, Jack Tennyson had trouble with Gage wanting to be an artist, but he also had trouble with Chase because Chase is gay. And so it's about Chase, but it's also about Gage's mom, Libby, who lost her, she's a new widow. And she spends a lot of time with her granddaughter, Ellie, who is about the same age as Harper. So those two eventually meet. And it's also about two new characters, two women that are also widows. And so one of them, these two widows started this group that gets together every Thursday night for all widows. And they meet at a coffee shop, but they don't drink coffee. They mostly drink wine and just are supportive of each other because, they're all without their husbands. So they're in their 60s, and this part is set in Tennessee and on the farm. So all that ties together.
Okay, that sounds interesting. I'm looking forward to it. So speaking of animals, I know you have a lab, and there's a lab in the story, and there's a lot of animals, but they're not just sort of background. It sounds like a lot of the animals are characters, just like the people in there, and they have a role to play. Can you kind of talk about that, like what the animals?
Sure. So in Promises of the Heart, which is the first in the series, I mentioned the three-legged golden retriever that Macy adopts, and his name is Keeper. And he's in a shelter, and no one wants to adopt him because he had cancer. He lost a leg, and he's disabled, but he's a sweetheart. And she, initially Maeve is pushing her to adopt him, and she's like, "No, I don't want a dog." And but he keeps tugging on her heartstrings, and she goes back. So they have their own story, and he did pry her heart open to considering Harper, so he does play an important role. And then Gage, he has a yellow lab named Gus, and he's a puppy. And when Gage first meets Maeve, he's really a little puppy, and he kind of breaks the ice between them because she's just enamored by the puppy, and that's how they start talking. So yeah, of course there's going to be animals, and I think in a lot of labs, of course, in all my books, there's at least one lab. My black lab Finnegan is laying right at my feet right now under my desk. So he's with me. He tells me when to stop writing and go for a hike. Keeps me sane.
Yeah, as pets should.
Yeah.
So one of the things, as I was reading your book, I saw that there was, I guess, three themes, if you wanted to talk about: family, faith, and forgiveness. Is that a way you sort of make your characters very relatable?
Yes. Well, I have a strong faith. I'm a pretty spiritual person. I start every day with a stack of devotionals, my Bible, and some other books that I like to read. And I'm a firm believer in prayer. And I feel like, back when I was trying to find a publisher for my first novel, The Gin and Chowder Club, I would tell God, if you let me find a publisher, I know he doesn't make deals. I know that. But I said, if you let me find a publisher, I will always include you, and I will always try to write uplifting stories. And so that's, my books are my way of, now that I've been blessed with a platform of being able to write and share stories with people, I feel like this is my way of giving back, of shedding light on people's paths. And that's important to me. That's probably the most important thing. So the faith aspect, my characters all have relationships with God and faith, and they struggle and question, just like we all do. And the family dynamic is still important too. So as it shows with Maeve and her sister Macy, all my books, if you go back and look at, even the beginning, the Gin and Chowder Club was about faith, family, and forgiveness. It was set in the summer of 1960 on the Cape about a young guy that gets into a relationship he shouldn't. And it's definitely about forgiving himself as much as being forgiven. So, and the other one was faith, family, and forgiveness. Yeah. So.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Got all three there. Perfect. So we'll take some questions from the audience there. So like I mentioned before, you can always put in the Q&A or the chat thing. So we'll take some questions. It looks like we have one from Becky. And she says, I was living in New Milford when Rugby and Rosie came out.
Oh my goodness.
And she's reading it to her grandson now. Wow. And also she wants to say she's happy for your success, and she wanted to, I heard a little bit when you were talking to Polly, but she wanted you to know that John Brown's father, Owen Brown, left Torrington, Connecticut, and moved to the Hudson area, and he's buried here in Hudson. So that's one of our sort of claim to fame there, is the John Brown family lived in Hudson, and then Owen Brown's buried in Hudson. So thank you, Becky, for that.
Well, I can tell Becky.
And we have another question, and
I just say that Rugby and Rosie is getting reprinted this summer. Did I say that already? I don't remember. I know I told Polly that.
Oh.
But yeah, it's found a small publisher up in Vermont that's going to reprint it this summer. So tell Becky that she can get a new copy for her grandson.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. That sounds great. Congratulations. That has to be awesome.
Yeah, it's been a dream of mine.
So we have another question. Bill is asking, okay. Bill is asking, who are some of the other authors that you admire?
Well, I have always liked Nicholas Sparks' books. I don't read as much as I used to, or I listen to a lot of books now. I haven't really been reading a lot of his books lately, but back in the beginning, he was one of my favorites. And of course, The Notebook. And I love The Bridges of Madison County. That's, Robert Waller, something. Those books were inspirational for my first book. And also, one of my favorite books is The River Runs Through It, which, I know they made a movie out of it, but the book is just fabulous. And I love that book. Right now I'm listening to, I had an event last night with another author that I have met before. She lives on the Cape. Her name is Patry Francis. And I'm listening to her book. It's called All the Children Are Home. And it's so good. I'm just enjoying it so much. The narration is wonderful. Kids, they have 4 different narrators because it's told in the first person. And so I would highly recommend it. That's what I'm listening to right now. But.
Oh, great. Those sound like wonderful books. So as an author, what's it like doing a book release via Zoom as opposed to, in the past when you got to mingle with people? Is that a big adjustment for you? Is it just?
It is a big adjustment. Promises of the Heart came out last February 4th. And so I was able to do a normal launch for a month or so. But then COVID hit, and I had to cancel several things, and people were asking me, well, we're going to do Zoom events. Would you want to? And I was very anti-Zoom back then. And I said, no, I don't want to. And so I was telling Polly that last night was my first real Zoom event or not a Zoom, but a webinar event as an author. And it's fine. I don't like not being able to see everyone. And I don't like being able to interact, but we'll get through it, I guess. And it is a good thing. I mean, I wouldn't have had an event in Ohio if it wasn't for this. So
That's true. Silver linings, right?
right, yeah.
So we have another question asking about what role does location play when you do research for the area, for the book?
Well, my first books were all set on the Cape, as I said, or Nantucket, because we had always vacationed out there, and I was very familiar with it, and it's such a beloved place by so many people. It's just I don't know how many of you guys have been there, but it's just a special place, and anyone who has been there knows it. It's like once you cross the bridge, you're just in a different world, and so that's why those books were set there. And when my agent asked me to change my setting, I'm like, okay, well, I'll do Maine or I'll do New Hampshire. She says, no, I really want you to change your setting. So Savannah was, I just like, I'd always wanted to go there. It seemed like it, with all the mystery of it and the hauntings and the cemetery, Bonaventure Cemetery, and just the whole historic aspect of it. So I settled on that, and I wrote the book before I had visited, and then before I submitted the book, went and visited, and then had to change some things when I found out I had wrong. But I also research online places. I look for restaurants. I look up their menus, and I pick their signature dish and put it in the book. And these places, they don't know that they're in a book because I never tell them, but there they are. They're in a book.
So the character names, how do you come up with all those? Do you have a spreadsheet? Do you just pick something out of a hat? Are they based off of people?
I actually have like a document on my laptop where when I see a name I like, I just put it on a list. I also have on that same sheet lists of titles, lists of Bible verses, quotes, things. And when I'm writing, I also put notes at the bottom of the document so that I can, I know where they are. If there's something really important that I want to add in, it's at the bottom of the document. But the names, a lot of my names in the first books were very biblical. So Maeve and Macy aren't really biblical, but I don't know, just names I like. A character, in the Gin and Chowder Club, the main character's name is Asa. And I have two boys, Cole and Noah, but I always thought if I had another son, I would have named him Asa because I thought that was a cool name. But I don't know, names I like. My dad would always say, where do you come up with these names? Can't you just pick Bill or Bob or...
Yeah. So Judy has a question and a comment. She asks, she was drawn to the book because of the location. Savannah is a complex, magical town. How did you capture the scissor?
You froze for me. How did I capture something?
Uh-oh.
Oh, sorry. I'll try it again here. How did you capture Savannah when you visited in a brief visit there? She mentions it's a very complex, sort of magical.
Okay. Well, I did research it. I got a travel guide on Savannah, and I looked online at different things, and I also read The Garden of Good and Evil, which is set, in Savannah, and talks about Johnny Mercer's house and the cemetery, Bonaventure Cemetery. So, and it's just so intriguing, the Spanish moss hanging from the trees. And so visiting there, of course, we went to all the places like the Old Pink House or Wet Willie's. That's not in the book, but we did go there. There's It's a cool place. I went down to the river walk along the Savannah River, and just toured. And I don't know, use my imagination.
Yeah, that sounds great. So, as an author, can you maybe describe the writing process? Do you basically pitch an idea?
Okay. So when I was switching publishers from the one I had been with for so long, my new agent thought that I would be able to get a publisher without writing a whole book. And so we had the summary and we had some chapters, and we weren't getting anywhere. I wasn't getting any nibbles from anyone. We were looking to get in with a bigger publisher. And so I ended up having to write the whole book. And there were actually 2 versions of Promises of the Heart. There was one that had a lot of the faith-based things in it. And nobody was taking it. And so, as hard as it was for me to take all that out, because it's important to me to have it in, we thought that maybe if it wasn't so strongly faith-based, that maybe a mainstream publisher would be more likely to take it. So I wrote a second version where I just pulled out all that stuff, and we kept going with it. Submitted the original version and the new version to different publishers. And finally, it was taken by this wonderful editor who just loved it. She read it in a weekend and loved it. And when we started working together, I mentioned that it was originally had a lot more faith in it, and asked her if I could work some of it back in, and she was totally on board with it. And but the process usually is, like, now that I have a publisher, the process is to make a proposal. So it's just 2 pages of a summary of what the book is about, and they will offer a contract with just the summary. And so that's a good thing, because writing a whole book without knowing for sure if you have a publisher is a big leap of faith. But every day I write. Every day I'm up very early. I walk every morning first thing, and then coffee, devotionals, shower, and at my desk working. And I try to write 1,000 to 2,000 words a day when I'm really under the gun. Otherwise, I'm easily distracted too. It takes self-discipline for sure to stay in your chair and work.
Right. So I'm not a car person, but in the story, there's a car that Mason gets. It seems very iconic and very interesting.
Mm-hmm. I didn't get the whole question, but yep, Mason buys an old Chevelle from an older gentleman and restores it. And in all my books, I will take someone I know and, without them knowing it, put them in the book. So the character that helps Mason restore the book is actually a friend of ours. He doesn't know yet that he's in it, but he always does all our car work, and he's a great mechanic. And so his name is Jeff Bresson, and my husband calls his garage JB's garage, and so that's in the book. But in the past, like in Promises of the Heart, I put in our family pediatrician when my boys were young, and they didn't know they were in it. And I've put their teachers have been in the books, and currently in this book, there's 2 ministers that I know that are in the book. They don't know they're in the book yet, but so it's just fun to add in like a name that of someone that I know, and then them be surprised about it when they read it.
So when I was reading, it kind of seemed like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that maybe Gage wasn't in his real, fun job. He wasn't in his dream job. And Maeve kind of sort of was. Is there going to be a point where they're both doing their dream job?
Well, I think Gage is definitely happier doing construction than he was being a farmer, but ideally he would be an artist full time. And so at this point in time, he's still not there. He's not even there in the next book that I just finished. So I don't know if he'll ever get there. It's hard to make it as an artist. But he enjoys working on that construction, refurbishing houses in Savannah, historic homes.
Okay. So we have time for one last question. And are you ever going to get back into maybe children's books? Have you ever thought about doing that?
I have thought about it. So my fourth children's book was a true story. It's called The Foxel. It's about Henry Beston's outermost house. So it's about an old house that was on the Cape. It was just this tiny little house, 16 feet by 20 feet, and it was right on the shore. And the man that lived there, built the house and lived there, he wrote a book called The Outermost House. And this little house, he lived there for a year back in 1928. And his writing was influential in creating the national seashore on the Cape. And so that book, I found a different publisher for up in Boston, and he loved it from the get-go, gave me complete freedom in the designing of it. And I have another book that I wanted him to publish, but he never accepted it. And it was about, there's this phenomenon that happens on the Cape where sea turtles, when October comes and the water starts to get cold, they get, the Cape is kind of like a horseshoe. And so they start to swim south, but they end up in Cape Cod Bay and they can't find their way out. And they get, when the weather gets cold, they get shocked, kind of like what happened in Texas this past winter when they rescued so many sea turtles. And so on the Cape, they do the same thing every November. There's like an army of volunteers that walk the shores of Cape Cod Bay and rescue these sea turtles that wash up on the shore, and they're cold shocked. And they fly them down south, or they bring them to the New England aquarium. And one year they rescued 2,000 turtles, and they had to airlift them out of there. And so I wanted to tell that story because it's such a phenomenon. It happens every year up here. And I'm a big fan of sea turtles. So, in fact, Harper in Promises of the Heart is a sea turtle fan too. They see all my characters. I get to live vicariously through my characters, but so I did try to get that book published, and I did the illustration for the cover and everything, and he turned it down. He wanted it to be more of a general book, covered more areas of the country. And I wanted to focus on what happened on the Cape. So I never went anywhere with that, but I would love to do that book in particular, if I could find a publisher.
Yeah, that would be an interesting story. I'd like to read that one too.
Children's books is
well, thanks so much for coming out tonight. And it's a wonderful time to meet you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. So thanks for everybody for coming out as well.
Yes, I
hope
you
Thank
look
you.
for my books.
And congratulations on your newest book. Looking forward to reading the next one as well. Oh, great. Well, good night to everybody, and thank you again, Nan. And everybody take care tonight.